The consolidation of relationships that prevents the consequences of this growing inducement from taking effect in the reactions of consciousness is constantly interrupted by being based upon money. This is because all such relationships are somewhat unstable and resistant to stabilization, particularly since money has no objective relation to personalities and does not, as does a status or lack of it, an occupation or a moral value, an emotional relation or an activity, become a part of personality. All relations based on these other life contents have some sort of stability because of the relative constancy with which they belong to the person. They resist the influence of elements of change which can take effect only after considerable growth. Money, however, lacking any quality and lacking any relation to a qualitatively determined personality as such, moves from one personality to the other without any internal resistance, so that the relations and situations that pertain to it can easily and adequately adjust to any change. Or, to formulate the problem in terms of our present interest, the fact that money can be accumulated, which reflects the mere quantitative character most clearly, means that it will most frequently and distinctly make itself felt on the determinate content of life. The threshold phenomena, so frequently associated with money, explain its basic character, part of which is also the unearned increment. Indeed, this is only one of the phenomena characterized in this way. For it testifies not only that the importance of more money lies in a proportional multiple of the importance of less money, but that this differential importance represents an abrupt change despite the purely quantitative change in its basis in qualitatively new, indeed opposite, results. Significance of the personal unity of the owner. This fact is based on an obvious presupposition which nevertheless requires further explanation. It can be expressed in the following way. Every sum of money has a different qualitative significance if it belongs to a number of people rather than to one person. The unit of the personality is thus the correlate or the precondition for all qualitative differences of possessions and their importance. Here the assets of legal persons are, in terms of their function, on the same level because of the uniformity of their administration. Similarly, we may speak of a nation's wealth only if we conceive of the nation as a unified possessing subject. That is to say, we have to conceive the assets owned by the individual citizens as being unified by their interaction within the national economy, in the same way as the fortune of one individual comes together as a practical unity through such interactions, for example distribution, the relation of individual expenditures to the total, balance between income and expenditure, etc. Money, whose importance as a value rests on its quantity, appears as many single quantities standing side by side, so that every sum, in order to operate as a unity, requires an extraneous principle which forces the partial quantities into a relationship and interaction, that is, into a unity. Just as the image of one world emerges from the separate contents of perception which are integrated into a personal unity of consciousness, and just as the sum of the elements of the world becomes more than a mere sum, and the whole attains a new significance beyond its separate parts, so, in the same manner, the personal unity of the owner affects money and confers upon its total quantity the possibility of realizing more or less of it in its qualitative importance. The contribution of this fact to our knowledge can perhaps be made clearer if we refer to a proposition in marginal utility theory. Every unit of quantity of a supply of goods has the value of that unit which is valued least, that is, which is used for the most inessential purpose. For if any unit were lost, the remainder would naturally be used for all more important needs and only the least important would remain unsatisfied. Thus, whichever unit would have to be foregone would be the least important. The value of a supply of goods is therefore determined not by the uses to which the goods might be put, that is not by the sum of the very diverse uses of individual units, but by the use of the least useful unit, multiplied by the number of units of the same size. One exception to this theory is generally admitted, and that is in the case where a sum of goods forms a unity and as such provides a certain utility effect which is not the same as the sum of uses of its individual parts. For instance, the existence of a forest, so we are given to believe, has an influence on the climate and weather, and therewith also on soil fertility, the health of the population, and the stability of part of the national wealth, etc. In short, the forest as a whole has a value which would remain totally outside our calculations if we were to estimate the utility of individual trees. Similarly, the value of an army cannot be judged according to the marginal utility of the individual soldier, nor can the value of a river be judged according to the marginal utility of a single drop of water. This distinction is also valid for the assets owned by an individual. Not only does 1 million marks in the possession of a single individual accord him a status and a social qualification that is totally different from the thousandfold multiple of its corresponding significance to the owner of 1,000 marks. Rather, at the basis of this subjective consequence, it is also true that the objective economic value of 1 million marks cannot be calculated in terms of the marginal utility of its 1,000 parts at 1,000 marks each. On the contrary, it forms a comprehensive unit in the same way as the value of a living creature, acting, as a unit, differs from the sum total of its individual organs. In the previous chapter one argued that the money price of an object, no matter how many coins it consists of, is nonetheless a unit. I stated there that 1 million marks are, as such, a mere aggregate composed of unconnected units. Yet as the value of a landed estate they are the unified symbol, expression or equivalent of the amount of its value and not at all a mere agglomeration of single-value units. This practical determination has its personal correlate. The quantity of money is realized in relation to the unity of a person as a quality and its extensiveness is realized as intensity, a process that could not be achieved by the mere summation of its constituent parts. The material and cultural relation of form and amount. Perhaps we can also express this in the following way. As a purely arithmetical addition of value units, money can be characterized as absolutely formless. Formlessness and a purely quantitative character are one and the same. To the extent that things are considered only in terms of their quantity, their form is disregarded.